In May 2023, I travelled to Alaska. This trip was in two parts, a cruise from Vancouver to Seward and an independent land journey, going to Denali National Park and back. This video explains how I planned my cruise. In 2019, before COVID and lockdowns were a thing, I had a Mexico cruise on the Norwegian Bliss. It was my first cruise, but it made me want to go on an Alaska cruise on the same ship. I nearly actually did that. A price came up that wasn't bad. In fact, I say bad, it was actually a really good deal. It was late in the season, but the challenge of arranging vacation time and flights just couldn't really be pulled off. This turned out to be the best outcome, as going that late in the season in a inside passage round trip, and we'll come back to that, probably wasn't the best option. Now we come to 2023. I've done a couple of cruises out of UK ports in 2022 to ease myself back into international travel without having to deal with all the hassle of flights that was going on in that time period. And now, in 2023, back then, I was ready to try Alaska again. But this time, I was thinking bigger. The Alaska cruise season is May through September, with July and August being the high season. But there are offerings in April and as late as October, and you might be able to get some great deals in April and October, but I wasn't keen on pushing the season out that early or late. Personally, I'm not sure I recommend that. I chose to go in May because it's still at the start of the season, so there are good prices to be had. The days are still quite long. You're looking at 17 hours of daylight in mid-May. There is still snow in the mountains, so it looks picturesque. And Alaska is actually transitioning into the few months when things actually grow and aren't sort of embedded under the ice. May is also the driest month in Alaska, though I wouldn't take that as a guarantee of anything. But if you're wanting to hedge your bets, May is one of the drier months. May, for me, proved to be a great choice. The only thing I'd point out is that May is very much a month of transition, just as it is with the weather, so it is with the tourist industry. So I did notice in Seward that some tours weren't available in early May, so just keep that in mind. This is why I vouched for the cruise that sort of got me to Alaska mid-May and the second half of May, as I thought that was a great compromise. Now, there are many videos recommending how to plan a trip to Alaska by cruise, and they go into a myriad of options. I'm happy to accept that this video isn't so much that, but I do think it's important to outline two things that critically shaped my cruise and will also shape yours. And I think they're the two biggest choices because they sort of roll forward and define a lot of other things. One is the need to cross the Gulf of Alaska to get to Seward. I needed to get there so I could begin my land portion. And two, I wanted to cruise into Glacier Bay, and that was something else I also wasn't willing to compromise on. So those two things pretty much defined my choices. The typical 7-day cruise falls into two types, known as an inside passage or Gulf of Alaska cruise. The latter is one way, and that's what I took. The inside passage cruises, due to being round trips, cruise through the inside passage and then get as far as, say, Skagway and then turn round. The cruises that cross the Gulf of Alaska also sail the inside passage, but go as far as Seward or Whittier, crossing the Gulf of Alaska to do so. To travel inland, you must get to these northern locations. I needed to get to Seward, so I immediately chose a cruise that crossed the Gulf of Alaska. Glacier Bay defines your choices in a different way. Basically, entry is limited to Glacier Bay National Park to 2 ships a day. This means not all itineraries include Glacier Bay, as I assume the cruise lines sort of compete over the slots. I won't say your cruise is ruined if you don't cruise Glacier Bay, but it is a glorious experience, complete with rangers on board. It's more than just the scenery. It is a whole package, and it's absolutely brilliant. I would say if your cruise to Alaska is going to be your only one, I would advocate trying to include Glacier Bay. So I recommend setting your stakes on what your what you can compromise on, and working around that so you get a contained set of options. You might put a stake in the ground about Glacier Bay, but not actually be that bothered about reaching Seward, so you're happy with an inside passage cruise that puts you back at the same port you left. I experimented with both Norwegian Jewel and Norwegian Spirit, both of which were doing northward and southward journeys between Vancouver and Seward. I even tried to do something really great, and if I could have pulled it off, that would have been my ideal version of this trip, was to go up on one ship, do a land portion, go back on another. Just couldn't get it to work, but if I could have coordinated that in a way that it was a week on ship, a week on land and a week on ship, and it was 3 weeks long, that's what I'd have done. Ultimately, I decided on Norwegian Jewel, leaving Vancouver on the 15th of May and landing me in Seward on the 22nd of May, thus falling into that midway and my land adventure being in the latter half of May. Okay, what should you pack? Now again, you can search the internet and YouTube and there'll be people doing 20-minute videos on individual items to pack. I'm going to approach it in a different way because I think these high-line principles are probably the best thing to follow. I did this trip with carry-on luggage. My suitcase was smaller than the maximum I could have actually taken, and I had my trusted Wanderer backpack, which can count as a personal item. I mean, it was a push. Primarily a push because you have a bulky item like an outer fleece, and also because I had hiking boots. If I'd have knew how well the weather was going to go, which we'll get to, I could have not brought the hiking boots. I will keep it simple and say just pack like you're hiking, as you can predict the weather, right? So this means layers, a waterproof, ideally one that's waterproof but thinner, shoes that are at least water resistant. You want things you can layer on and take off, because you may start the day under one weather regime and end it in another. And avoid super bulky items. For this reason, I only took one outer layer warm fleece, as it was the bulkiest items. Things you should avoid are the winter coat. I don't get the winter coat. You know, maybe it's a British thing. I don't know how it transfers to the US. But people ask, oh, this cruise is to the fjords. Should I bring a winter coat? Which conjures up memories of these really thick puffer coats that you used to wear as kids to school. I don't think you should do that. Layers with an outer waterproof, right? And then avoid denim and cotton. The reason you avoid denim and cotton is if it rains, denim and cotton holds water, cools down and makes you feel cold. If you're wearing layers of proper hiking gear, you know, your trousers are going to quick dry or slightly repel water. Tops like this sort of don't hold water, they dry quick. Layers, hiking gear, waterproof. That's the way to go. Okay. I don't usually break down the costs of my trips, but there was an interesting facet of this trip. When people asked me about how I got here and I said that I'd cruised along the coast to get to Seward before my inland portion, you know, they thought that was quite amazing, and some people indicated that it might cost a lot. I mean, the truth is the cruise was the cheap bit, right? The land portion was far more expensive than the cruise, and had the opportunity to be ridiculously more expensive than the cruise, because I chose some options that bumped up my price. Okay, so let's go into the cruise. This is how it went down. I could have got the cruise, 7 days, for £600. That's less than £100 a day. It's actually £85 a night, including food and everything. I mean, you can't knock that, right? I did add free at sea, meaning I had the drinks package, Wi-Fi and $50 off each excursion. And that brought things up to £800, so £114 a night. I mean, that's still not bad. None of my hotels on this trip were anywhere near £114, apart from maybe one, right? I didn't get it for that price because I wanted to choose my cabin. So lesson number one when you're new to cruising that you learn is all the prices are if you're willing to go for all the great prices are if you're willing to go for an inside cabin and let the cruise line choose it. As soon as you upgrade or choose where you want your cabin to be, it's bang, 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 and everything adds up, right? So I chose my cabin. This got me to £142 a night. Now that was still acceptable to me, but it no longer felt like a deal. But I did put the lowest bid, £200. lowest bid possible in for a balcony cabin. Because I thought, you know, if I'm going to experiment with a balcony cabin, which I've not had before, Alaska's probably the place to try it. And I got it. So now I was $157 a night with a balcony. And I felt then my deal was back to a sweet one. But the truth is, if you want an inside cabin, you're willing to let the cruise company choose your cabin and not fiddle with extras, you can get a ludicrously cheap deal, even to somewhere like Alaska. I mean, some people were doing back-to-backs. One person was doing 4 legs, so I guess that's effectively 2 back-to-backs. I mean, some people were like, whoa. But, I mean, he was probably getting each leg for $400 to $600. It was an amazingly sweet day to do it, and it meant he was basically travelling all the May. A small word of warning, this was 2023. I have no idea how deals are going to pan out in 2024 because cruising has suddenly become mega popular, which is a bit ironic, though I'm obviously part of that, considering COVID and stuff. But yeah, who knows how the prices are going to pan out in 2024. The thing to keep in mind, as however cheap you got the night rate on your cruise, is chances are you will be doing excursions. I found Ketchikan, Juneau and Skagway to be the Alaska equivalent of those tourist towns in Spain. You know, there's a lot of tourist shops, lots of jewellery shops, and it is very touristy, right, whichever way you look at it. Now, I didn't know that going in, so I wasn't so much surprised. What I was surprised by is less that I wasn't expecting it and how good the Instagram game is of those towns. It's ridiculous, right? People are obviously taking very selective photos, and it's not like the rest of the town looks bad. I mean, they're nice, but you know, they're not taking pictures of those touristy streets or anything like that. It's selective angles. So Alaska is a heavy itinerary cruise. I did an excursion in each port and booked them via NCL. I found with my $50 reduction on each excursion, and that's $50 per excursion, right? So if you do 2 in a day, it's $100, right? Basically brought the prices down quite close to booking them independently. So I just went with NCL's versions. I did a rainforest e-bike tour and nature walk in Ketchikan, a Meadenhall Glacier and Whale Quest in Juneau. The first one was 107, the one in Juneau was 123. The White Pass Railway and Klondike Bike Tour was 172. That was my dearest one. I enjoyed all these tours. I was glad I did every one of them. The White Pass Railway one was probably the most epic, and that's why I wanted to go to Skagway. I mean, it's basically like World's Dangerous Roads, but on a train, right? And then once we got to this epic height, we biked down. Absolutely brilliant. Remember, these are moderately priced tours. I know, shocking. Those are the moderate ones, right? And some people double up. If you do something really crazy, like go for the triple threat of helicopters, glaciers, and dog sleds, you can easily be looking at $600 for that excursion. So is there anything I would change? Now, I did have a think about this, and I decided there was nothing I would change. It was a great cruise, and all my choices worked out great. Possibly I'd consider not choosing my cabin to get the lowest rate per night. If I hadn't got the balcony upgrade, I was aware I'd upped my costs, so no, it was no longer a sweet deal. But because I got the balcony grade, it worked out. But that's one thing I'd consider, not risking the upping in room price. I think what I've learned is things that I would make sure I didn't do, that I happened to avoid through maybe a bit of luck, but now I'd be quite conscious of it. So I wouldn't leave myself in Ketchikan, Juneau or Skagway without an excursion. I'd make sure I had Glacier Bay on my itinerary. I'd make sure I had Skagway on the itinerary and doing the White Pass Railway. And personally, I'd choose to cross the Gulf of Alaska because then you feel like you've gone all the way. Though I fully understand that was primarily linked to the fact I was doing a land portion. If I wasn't doing a land portion, it wouldn't have made as much sense, and it would have made sense to return back to Vancouver for ease of travel. Would I do another Alaska cruise? You know what, I'm not sure. But that's primarily because I don't repeat myself much, right? I think part of the problem would be not that another Alaska cruise wouldn't be great, but a combination of ship, occupancy, and I have to say the people on the cruise might result in the next one not living up to this one and be a bit of a disappointment. I think that would be my main concern. So that's how I did my Alaska cruise. If you want to know how I planned my land adventure, which was independently organised once I was deposited in Seward, you can check out the video on the screen right now.